just. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know this is fun. That's such a fun book there.
And also,
Yeah, it's not so funny. There's even like 4 times income reel that also showing in CD, and it's the same floor plan. And this is the same floor.
Okay, well, let's get going on this here. Since we only got a few minutes of Cassie.
I know.
So you're good, right?
I'm good,
Okay,
thanks.
because you're gonna get the best show you've ever seen so far.
You have a private train.
Right, yeah, just us, I guess, huh? Really? Yeah, Tim, you ready? Ready to get started? Okay. All right. So to start with, just so we can jump right into it, exciting thing, I had a call when I went out to San Diego. And I want to, touch on that a little bit too, that trip. So got to go with Tina and then met with Seth O'Byrne. Do you all know who Seth O'Byrne is?
I looked him up when I saw your picture.
Yeah. Did you see him?
I
His
did, yeah.
production or videos or
Yeah.
anything that he's done?
Yeah.
Guy's phenomenal. So he actually was a part of Troop when we were down in San Diego a while ago, and he started under Tina. Tina had she was flipping homes out there, so they had history together. And since then, he's taken on. He's a high-end luxury producer. He builds the luxury market. Welcome. Good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Now I'm feeling a little bit more. We're gonna get one more. That's it. Yeah. So basically just sharing a little bit about the trip, but it was awesome going out there. It was awesome just having a great conversation with Tina. We actually all drove out there together. So that was cool. And then just really speaking to Seth and just kind of seeing how they broke into the luxury market, how he's built his team was also very helpful as well. He takes more of a co-op type approach, not trying to get as big of a split from the agents that are on his team, but more so he's there, they get to use his name, they get to use his brand, his reputation, his past sales. And he's there to support him, but most of these agents are pretty self-sufficient. And they go out there and they know how to take listings. His top producer, I think, made 750 last year. So, this team's doing very well, right? And it was great for a lot of different things. But the biggest thing I appreciated about him was just how authentic he was. And he just always stayed true to himself. And he's always, if you ever see him on social media or anything that he promotes, it's all about having fun. And that's how he's been. He's like, look, I'm not. You're gonna hear me say some things right now that that he was just very verbal with, but he was just like, look, he goes into like a funky restaurant. He's all, that's just rich people shit. Like that was his big thing. But he jokes with them about that, and they love it because he's like, look, he's like with the high-end properties, he's like, just like if you have a mechanic that's a good mechanic who's good with any, let's just say Toyota, any type of vehicle, right? A high-end car still needs a great mechanic, right? They just have a different specialization, but it's still the same type of skill set that that you're going to work on any car. It's the same thing with what we do in real estate. And he said him and his buddy were talking, and they were just trying to figure out like how are they going to break into this luxury market? How are they going to compete at that level? And he basically said, he's like, this sounds really ridiculous. And he's like, and I've talked about it before. He's like, what do we have to do marketing wise where people can see that we are better than everybody else? And they're like trying to figure out like, what do we have to do to market that? And guess what the answer was? What's that?
Same thing as the rest of anything else in the market,
To be better than everybody else. That was the answer. He was like, well, we have to become better than everyone else. So the key is it's problem focused. Okay, solution focused. So identify what their problems are. Identify what the rich people problems are for these types of home or whoever your audience is, and understand how you're going to provide the solution. And he said the exciting thing about what's happening in the market right now, because what he did, he does a full-on production. They'll take 3 days to film and stay, and he's there at the property. Stay there at the property. Get it ready, film it, brings in actors, actresses, and they do a full-on production. with every single listing, especially these high-end properties that they do. So on the high side, he spent about $7,500 on producing one of these videos. They're all not that high. That's on like the highest side, but that's where he's invested his money, is making a full-on production. And the line he used that I loved was, he said, if you're trying to sell a $5 million home, he's like, the way I look at it is I'm trying to sell a $5 million business, right? And if you're going to sell a $5 million business, there's going to be a lot of work and effort that's involved in strategically planning how we're going to market this business, how we're going to get that word out there. And so that's his approach. And I loved it. I thought he's like, it's a $5 million home, right? I mean, there's a lot of money that's going to be made. And if you were selling a business for $5 million, you're going to take a lot of time to truly try to understand that. Okay. So just wanted to share some of that. I'll bring up more things, especially as they come to me. But it's, I mean, the biggest thing is, as I said, was there were a lot of ahas, but that one thing was just understanding he just kept having fun with the business, and he continued to. And everything he does is about just being in the element. He's not trying to be anything that he's not. And that's what a lot of people thought, is that he faked it till he made it. And in reality, he just understood and discovered what was important to the people that he was looking to serve. And he's like, and it bothered me very early on because he wasn't in those circles. And he's like, really, there's two ways to do it. You either have to be, you know, he's like the top guy or person who's in that area, who is the number one and the number two. They go back like 3-4 generations in that specific area. They have all the relationships. They're a part of all the country clubs, right? He's like, you either have that, or you have to figure out how are you going to break into that. And really what they're looking for is somebody that they know that can get the job done. He's all about pricing it is so challenging. And then he also, when he keeps talking about the rich people shit, right? And he says, so rich people like funky stuff, right? And he's like, so something that you would think a traditional buyer would be like, why is this property so unique and strange and crazy? He's like, it'll sell. He's like, there's going to be some person who wants to express themselves with this particular home. They're looking for different things. So he said, in terms of pricing it, they're the hardest things to price, hardest things to figure out. Is I'll just take the listing. So that's the key, is anything that's up there, regardless of what price they want, he's like, take the listing. And so he was very adamant about that. He was also adamant about trying to think of some other key things that he brought up. Again, it'll come to me as we're talking about it, but you know, it's understanding and having a game plan. So I try to use some of that with this recent listing. So ironically, while I'm with him, I get a referral for a listing, and it's a past client of mine who I saw at a mixer. It was like a fundraising event for St. Bonnie's. So I'm catching up with him, supporting his wife there. He's telling me about I got a buddy who had their home listed. It's been on the market for like 6 months. So, you know, I could tell it's already been listed. He's like, but I told him, you're the guy, like, you're the one that's going to get it done. And I said, well, I appreciate that. But I'm thinking, okay, they're still under contract. I had no idea where they were at with it. Well, he shoots me a text as we're there in San Diego and says, hey, the contract just expired. It was in escrow. It fell out of escrow. And I told them, here's his contact info. And I told him to reach out to you. So I appreciate it. So I call him up really quick, goes to his voicemail, just leave a quick voicemail. Of course, says we're in the meat of this conversation, right? We drove almost 3-4 hours to go out there to spend some time. We got to spend the night because it's, you know, just trying to lug back was a whole nother thing. But the whole thing was for this meeting. And then now this guy calls. And it's like, do you take the call and step out? It's like, heck yes. I was like, sorry, I got to take this call right now. So I step out. But thankfully, Dan and Tina, they were still asking a lot of questions, getting info, and they, you know, and they caught me up to speed. But I take the call and I start speaking to them. But the very first question that I start with, and this has come up, is how can I help you? Okay. You know that they're reaching out to you to either interview you or try to find out your services. So before you start pressing on questions or start just saying how great you are, that you got all the answers, I start with an open-ended question. Again, they're reaching out to me. How can I help you? Right. And then he just starts. He said, well, I got your name from Joe, heard that you can help me with the sale of my home. You know, so I said, well, tell me a little bit about it. So he starts sharing with me the story. The key question I got on there on that particular one was price point. So I at least did enough research ahead of time to know that the home was originally listed at $960,000. Okay, it's a 2,000 square foot home in Simi, full property, end of a cul-de-sac. It's got an ADU, a garage that's been converted for an ADU. And I can see the photos. Photos look pretty decent. It actually was a pretty decent in terms of the photos, but no aerial shots. Nothing showing the location in terms of the cul-de-sac. Solar is actually, you can't even tell it has solar, but solar is going to be paid by the seller. It's like 30K. So I'm getting all this information on that phone call. And he's just explaining it all to me. And normally in the past, I would press on how bad the experience was and just get them really heated and upset. I didn't do that this time. I'm just listening, asking questions, getting as much as I can. Key thing is I wanted to make sure I saw them before anybody else. Remember, property just expired. What happens when a property expires or cancels? Exactly, it's sold out. So you know he's getting hit by every single person. So now my goal is to get face to face with him as quickly as I can, right? So I set it up, but we're in San Diego. I let him know. I said, I'm in San Diego for this work thing. I'll be back tomorrow. What time works for you? He said, well, I actually work all day, so I won't be back till after 5 o'clock. I said, okay. And then he's on Saturday. It's the same thing too. I said, all right. And I wanted to do Friday night. I'm trying to remember why it didn't work, but we ended up doing Saturday at 6 o'clock is the appointment that I get set up. So set the appointment. Before I go to the appointment, I asked him, I said, so what price do you have in mind, right? Seeing the history, seeing he started at 960, went all the way to 860. He told me he had an offer, they accepted it. Then he said that he's like, it just seemed fishy. They did it 3 days before it expired and I get this offer, right? He's like, I don't know if it's a legit offer or not. Then they try to get another $40,000 in credits, right? And he's like, and they did a home inspection. What else did they inspect? Termite inspection. He didn't see any of the inspections. This is all just verbal, but he knows they went to check it out. But then they try to hit him with that. I said, well, look at in terms of how your home was listed. You started high, right? Any buyer that sees that many days on market knows that they don't have much competition. So what are you attracting? It's similar to a for sale by owner. You're attracting investors, flippers, right? Anybody who's going to lowball it. So he shares with me 840 is his number. So I know price is going to be an issue. Typically, commission's an issue, right? So what I start trying to uncover is what challenges am I going to have before I can secure this and make sure that we get it and be as prepared as I can be before we go out there. So pricing, I figure it's going to be an issue, 840 as a price. And 840 actually still would have been probably a pretty decent price. He was at 858 when you got that one offer. Well, I get him in person to disclose to me that 800 is the offer that was submitted. So the number that I end up recommending is 800,000. That's the number of the offer that did it. I said, well, you got an $800,000 offer, but you're listed at 858. I said, at a minimum, as your agent, I would advise you, instead of taking that $800,000 offer, let's drop the price. Let's drop it from 858. If you're willing to take it 800, let's drop it down and see if we can generate some more activity and get higher than 800,000, right? So he's like, I like that. So off the phone call, he said, I can tell you're already 10 times better than the agent that I had listed. And I asked him, I said, well, how'd you hear? Look the agent up. It's from Studio City, out of area agent, right? So then I want to know, he said she did like 3 open houses up front, but again, at 960,000. Well, how'd you come up with the price? Zillow had it over $1 million. And you hear Zillow, it's like, yeah. I said, I didn't even look at Zillow because I already know, right? That it's typically going to throw off people's mindset with it. He said, well, I was willing to drop the price right from the beginning. He's like, but you know, she had me go down in these increments. And then when he did the final drop and got to 858, he did that in November. I said, well, how many showings did you have between November to the end of January? He said, maybe 2 at 858. What would you do with 60 days and maybe 2 showings over that period of time? He said, oh, I didn't know if it was because of the holidays. I said, we got 7, 8 offers the week before Christmas, right? On a property in Ventura. It was the week before. We got 8 offers. So yeah, it's a slower time, but if you're priced right, you're gonna get the action. So are you guys kind of getting in terms of the picture that you want to paint? And I'm sure you're already doing this. You're probably already doing it, but does this make sense? It's not rocket science, right? But it is, you have to understand what is their problem. right? What is their challenge? They're trying to sell their home. But how do we dig deeper than that? Instead of just trying to compete on price and commission. Because I was talking with an agent just yesterday, and that's what the prospective seller just said. Look, want to get the highest price I can get at the lowest cost possible. Right out the gate, right? That's what she's prepping her for before she meets with her. So how do you counter that? What are some things that you do? And that's what I'm asking the group here. What are things you do when you know that you have a seller who may want a price that's unrealistic or super high and only wants to pay the cheapest commission? What are ways to overcome that? That's really what I wanted to talk about today. What are some different things you've done? Or where do you start going? Because it shouldn't be just to give an answer, right? You got to dig a little bit deeper.
I mean, to begin with, if it's, the motivation is gonna be the most important. So if it's, the concept is just to see what they can get
Right.
for the highest price, most likely, at that point, I would reconsider that client. But if there are other things that come up in that discovery, then I'll start pushing on those.
Good.
And then, it's a matter of just doing the homework and providing the data.
Good.
So,
To help influence them
right.
on the proper way. I'm gonna hit you with one thing, Cass, before you go. This one. No, and it's not, I'm not gonna ask you, I just wanted to make sure I shared it. So, really quickly, I got to, when I came up with my game plan of how we're gonna approach this, you break it down and says 6% total commission, just so you know, 3 net sheets. Have 3 net sheets before you show up, already pre-printed. You can find out what the payoff is. You always find out the payoff, get the 3 net sheets. And I'm doing it with All Valley Escrow, and I'm letting the agent know, hey, I need 3 prices. A high price is $840 price, $820 price, and an $800,000 price. Okay, have those net sheets ready to go. Add 6% commission on them, 3 on both sides. And I've done it in the past, 3.5 on my side, 2.5 on the other side. And this one I did 3 and 3, because what I wanted him to understand, I learned this from Russ's training, is you have to sell the property 3 times. Okay. So I said, you need to offer 3%. I'm already reading it. This guy's a car sales manager, right? So he's stoic in terms of his responses of how I'm giving him the information. I said, you need to offer 3% CSL. And he's like, let me guess, you charge 3% on your side? I said, actually, I do typically charge 6, 3.5 on my side, 2.5 on the other side. I said, I'm sure Joe shared with you that I went to law school. I said, I do a lot for our clients, right? In terms of not just negotiating the best terms, but protecting them in the process and making sure we accomplish what you want. So we're also in a shifting market. So the focus is, instead of 6, focus on the 3. Get really good at telling the story about the 3. And the previous agent did 2.5. So all I'm having to overcome is 0.5%. At 800,000, that's $4,000. So you have to get them to understand, by you offering an additional 4,000, right? And they're shopping and showing properties, and everybody else is at 2.5, and you see some at 2. If you're at 2% and you hit a hurdle, they're out. That agent doesn't care. The agent's like, screw it, I'm gonna get paid 2.5% on the next house that I sell them. I'm gonna make an extra $4,000, and they're really not gonna work that hard. Yet they're making 3% commission. How many 3% deals have you seen fall out of escrow? I can't think of one. The second you get that offer accepted, you're closing that transaction. So this is what Russ teaches, is that first you sell it to the client first, based on pricing and the way, the condition that it looks like. Secondly, you sell it to the agent. The agent, you want that agent working for you, working for your seller. How do you get them working for you? Offering them 3% commission. Does that make sense? Because you're going to have to overcome appraisal and repairs. I said, we accept it. We have a solar situation, which you've already agreed to pay for. I said, but that still creates hesitation for people that don't understand it. They've been told, stay away from solar. I said, yours is going to be paid off. So it's a huge benefit for whoever takes over this. So break it down, instead of the 6%, and they're looking at 45,000+ in commissions at that price point, break it to 3%, right, on that side. And then I did stand my ground on my 3, and we went back and forth and came to the agreement, ultimately took it at 6% because of that. But it was separating that. I learned that from somebody else's, focusing on the selling office side for the 3% first. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit more. I'm recording it, but I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you. No, we'll get into some more details. No problem. So I call it a commission story commission pitch, whatever you want to call it. But you want to work on that and get very comfortable with figuring out how to paint that picture and showing the value of the commission. The other point that I made was I said, well, your last agent, she charged you 5% commission. I said, unfortunately, and I'm not saying anything about that particular agent. A lot of agents will charge 5%. I said, but she didn't get paid anything because she couldn't close the transaction, right? She couldn't price it in the way that it should have been priced, couldn't negotiate the terms to the point that everybody's happy at the end and we're able to close this transaction. I said, so while we're talking about commission, the only way I make anything is if you're happy with the final terms of what you're walking away with. That's when I showed him the $800,000 net sheet of what he'd walk away with. And it was a little bit better than he expected as he's just doing the calculations in his head. And it had everything, had prorated taxes on there, right? It's got what he's got to pay taxes. It had NHD, had our processing fee of $395 on there, had what else on there? Home warranty. Yep, I think it did $650. And that was the very first thing when I met him face to face. I asked him, I said, do you have a seller's home warranty on this? And he said, oh yeah, I was going to pay like $1,000. He's thinking of the buyer's home warranty, right? I said, well, one of the key things I want to make sure you're aware of is that we are a Crest brokerage. Do you know what that means? He said, no. I said, well, what that means is when you list a home with our brokerage, Century 21 Everest, right? That we pay additional to have this Crest policy designation that allows us, when you pay for a home warranty, to have 6 months coverage if anybody tries to come back and sue you, right? For misrepresentation, not disclosing something, whatever the case is, and they try to come back, you're going to have 6 months coverage of up to $50,000. I said, that's something unique that our brokerage offers that most competitors don't offer that. So that's one of the very first things we're talking about. Trying to create that safety, right? Trying to create that we're the trusted source. So it's things that you have to try to plant seeds and ask deliberate questions to make sure that they understand this is what we're bringing to the table, okay? We're not just your traditional person out there just trying to do whatever we can to take your listing. So getting back to the question on how do you overcome somebody who just wants the highest price or the lowest commission? I refer to it, and I do this in different other types of prospecting and recruiting and things like that, is what people will tend to do is chase the wrong things, right? They chase the highest price. It's a business model approach. An agent will come in, just like we talked about on luxury, what this last listing agent said, take any listing, no matter what the price, whatever, because funky stuff sells, right? So I'm getting better at editing what I'm saying now. Funky stuff sells. So he said, take anything, right? Maybe in the high end world, you do that. What I'm seeing, especially in this market, for a majority of the properties that we see out there, is you have to be very good at being able to differentiate between the different business models. So I use this in my presentation, and I'll say some agents, and I'm not talking bad about them, I'm saying because of the type of industry we're in, they're going to tell you what you want to hear to try to get your listing, right? You hear me say, I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear to get your home sold. You have to separate yourself from that. And you have to set that as an expectation and ask them, is that what you want? Right? And they're like, yeah, tell me what I need to do. I just need to move this home. Well, that's great. So the part that concerns me of the agent who's going to tell you, yeah, you can get $960,000 for this house, right? Let's just put a sign out there, figure it out. And we'll see, and if we need to, we'll drop the price down the road and yada, 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 whatever the case is. The problem I have with that is if we see average days on market, and that's what I printed out. We're going to get into the Flex Market Summary Report, what I used at the presentation. Average days now is pushing 50, 60 days on the market for 93065, right? So it's almost 2 months of sitting on the market on average. So one business model, to me, is not genuine. They're going to tell you what you want to hear to get the listing, take it at a high price, or reduce their commission as low as possible with full intention of getting their sign out in your front yard and hoping the longer that sign's out there, the longer the neighbors can drive by and possibly somebody call them for another listing or another buyer opportunity. And that's one business model. We all know of internet brokerages that have a similar type of discount approach that could care less. All they're trying to do is attract as much action and views on their particular website, and they'll discount their rate. But what they're hoping is they're going to get paid on the purchase side, that they're going to attract a buyer from that sign, from that listing, and then put them in another house. Now, you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is that what you want? Do you want somebody who wants their sign out in your front yard for 6 months, hoping to generate other opportunities, more importantly than making sure we move your home? Does that make sense? This is a big thing to be able to differentiate between. And you have to get them to understand that your goal is to ultimately do everything that you can to promote their property until you get the job done. And most importantly, negotiate the best terms. And the way to do it, number one, is starting with intelligent pricing. And so you need to be prepared with what's going on in that area. And ironically, with this whole situation, it was a long day. I won't get into the details of that. I leave my laptop at the house. I had no laptop there. No, when I went to the listing appointment, and it's a good almost 45-minute drive to getting from my house there. And I had to run here to print out the listing agreement. So these are things that you have to must bring to every appointment. So this could be a preview of a home. I didn't set an official listing presentation on Saturday. I said, I need to see inside your home. When can we do it? Saturday at 6 o'clock. Well, my intentions, full intentions, were to list the home and take it that day. And in my head, I'm already thinking, I know I'm the best person for the job and that I can get the job done, right? And as I show up, I came and I had a suit and tie on. I was ready, was cleaned up. I was 5 minutes late, which I'd never recommend doing by any means. I was flying, trying to get there as on time as possible. Crazy day. And I called them on the way to let them know. I called them about 30 minutes ahead of time, said, look, it looks like I'm going to be about 7 minutes late, but I wanted to make sure that I asked you these questions. And I asked them a couple questions. I think about his solar, what his intentions were. So I'm doing more discovery as I'm giving him that info, but I didn't want him sitting there waiting. Okay, great, this guy's late. So I'm telling him as far in advance as possible that, hey, I'm going to be about 7 minutes late. He said, no worries. I said, well, I apologize about that. Did make my excuses, just owned it, and then showed up. As I show up to the place, he's in the front. He's dressed a little bit more casual than I am, which is okay. But they're making their judgment there in the first 30 seconds. They're reading you. They're seeing what you drive up in. They're seeing how you come and approach them. And I asked them, still, the house is empty. I knew it was empty. Would you like me to take my shoes off? He's like, no, that's all good. Come in. Ask them that question, right? And then as we start going through, then I'm going to ask him, can we tour the home? Even though I can go around and just do it myself. Some people like to do it themselves, to see it in the eyes of a buyer, yada, yada. That's their approach. For me, I'm always going to ask them to take me around because I'm discovering. We're having that conversation. You're already presenting. It's not starting with the tap, then a map. Then we're going to talk about needs, wants, and expectations, right? Then we're going to get to my plan of action, what I do to get home sold. Then we're going to talk about the market, where it was, where it is, where it's at. And then finally, if you feel confident with what we say, we're going to take care of it for you. None of that came up. But I know exactly what needs to happen in that conversation for us to get to where he's ready to go. That's the key. You have to be able to communicate. This guy was more of a driver, get straight to the point. Driver analytical, he's listening. The numbers were important to him. So as we're walking around outside by the pool in the back, and I'm asking him questions and not trying to be, you got to be careful that it doesn't come across as judgmental. This was another nugget that came up from Seth. People, especially in these high-end properties, typically have put in 200,000+ in their home and getting it ready to potentially sell their house. You have to be excited about their home, no matter what. No matter what. And I've heard it many times from top agents, or I've gotten a listing against a top agent. I heard the feedback from the seller, and I've heard it from other people say the same things. A lot of these strong agents come in and will talk down to a house and trying to show that it's not worth as much as what the seller is thinking. That's not the way to do it. You educate them and help them self-discover. You don't convince them because you're the expert. that you know better than they do, and their house isn't as good as they think it is. That makes sense, right? You get what, it's a very important point. So it's always being authentic, but you have to find things that you're excited about with that property, and they have to feel it. They got to feel that you're going to be excited in promoting their home. They have to sense that. So you have to look at the things that you can, but you also have to ask them questions like, is there anything else you plan to do prior to us putting it on the list, listing your home? He's like, well, I want to sell it right away, right? So this is where it got. So it didn't get straight to, I asked for 6%. He said yes to 6%. There was a dance that went back and forth with it. And I was willing to flex because he was a referral from a past friend, right? The key is I wanted him to offer 3% selling off his commission. That's the focus. So I told him, I said, you know what, because you're a friend of a friend, I'll do it for 2.5 on my side. But do you see the difference from starting at 6 versus starting at 5 and then trying to do a favor and then ending up at 4.5 or lower, right? Because we're starting at 5. We have to start at 6. It's what Tim Galvin taught Danielle. And I've used that since he shared that.
He used to always tell us to put that on your contract, and then if you have to adjust it, you adjust
Line
it in
through it.
writing.
I loved it.
Yeah.
And it was perfect. And since Danielle picked that up, I changed that into my listing presentation. And I do. And I started with 6 in there. I left the 2.5 blank though. Actually, no, I wrote in 2.5. And then I put a line through it and put 3, showing that I'm giving up more on my side on that one. So I did have 2.5 in there, and I crossed it out, put 3% to show that I was giving more, but I left the 6 at 6. So I did ultimately, he did get me once at the point where we're going through the disclosure regarding agency relationships, right? And I'm like, well, if we represent both sides, and he's like, I have to ask. And it's like, I already know what's coming. Well, if you represent both sides, can you discount more for us? And I smiled and I said, look, I'll do it for 5 if I represent both sides. Do you see the difference of hey, good morning, starting at 5%, and now where I started at 6, and I'm doing them a favor by coming down to 5 if I represent both sides. I'm pretty excited about that as well, right? On both sides of it. So all starts with where, and I'm not driving up there. In my head, I'm thinking, why am I even thinking 6%? Like I'm thinking, is that too much? Is he gonna decide to go with somebody else? So we got into the commission conversation a little sooner than I was expecting to do it, but I'm glad that we did. We're talking about a listing appointment that just came up on Saturday. And it worked out. So we got the listing and got it at 6. Thank you, 6%. And so just sharing some ways to how to approach it, how to focus on the selling office side at 3% first. So they understand it's not all coming to you, but there is a chance that that can happen. And so where I flexed, as I said, I do 5 if I represent both sides, right? And in the past, I'm always going to be transparent. I would do 5, represent both sides. If 5% regular, 2.5, 2.5, if I represented both sides, I'd do it for 3.5%. That was a pretty common thing with sellers who were so big on, no, I got to get a good deal. That was the way I could help them still win, right? Because if you do represent both sides, let's say just leave it at 6%. What is the seller typically going to ask you to do when that situation comes about? I mean, sometimes they won't say anything, but is it not unheard of for a seller to say, well, can you do us a favor if since you're making 2 commissions on this side? So you can pre-negotiate that. Could cost you money. I'd hold out if you can and try to keep it at the 6%. So I got to be honest about everything, you know what I mean, in terms of what I've done in the past and then what I currently do. You never want to lose the listing over that. But the whole point is that's not what you're starting with in the conversation. You got to create the value. So the things that created value on this particular property, I knew about 2 recent sales that closed in December at $775,000. And the good thing is they both started a little under at like 770 and went out at 775. And then the other one was 770, went out at 820. So I talked to him about those 2 deals, and he knew, again, without my laptop, right? Because I left my laptop, that was the case. So the things that I was going to start writing here that must-haves when you show up to a presentation or a preview: residential listing agreement, C21 addendum, For me, flex market summary report. What I call my report card. That's your past sales for the last year to 2 years. I'm gonna try to bring a marketing piece, brochure in the folder. So they see the high quality photos. 3 net sheets. I'm trying to think at a minimum. That's a great question. I'll get to it right now. So then the CMA, at least 3 solds, 3 pendings. Right now, 3 actives. And then always make sure that you did your research on the actives of what you're currently against right now. How many actives, and we'll get into the details. So with the 3 net sheets, we were sharing it a bit ago. It's actually something I'm very appreciative. Somebody taught me a while ago. So for this one, started at 960. It was on the market for 6 months. It expired. They got into escrow when they got it down to 858. When I talked to him on the phone, he said 840 was his number. When I'm pulling all the comps and looking and seeing those recent sales at 775, especially in December, I could tell appraisal could be a concern or an issue, even though this property has quite a bit. So the 3 net sheets give you a range. So you have a high, a middle, and a low. And for me, all of them had 6% commission on there. But I don't just put 6%, I split it up between listing and buying side so they can see that you're not getting the entire thing. And then I'm going to highlight what they net. That's going to be the biggest thing that I highlight on the net sheet. This piece is the piece that I really want to make sure I spend time with right now. And I'm going to show a couple other things that you're more than welcome to make copies of. Did you all see the Economist on Friday? Okay, if you can watch that, you saw it. It's gold, right?
Yes.
So much good information.
Email that to us this morning or last night.
Yeah, so I'm gonna hit a couple points from there too. So something really important to know. Right now at about $850,000 purchase price. Okay, you want to know these numbers. Okay, the average household size income that's required is 220,000. 220,000 household size income with 20% down. So that's going to give you roughly, let's just say $180,000 cash to close, 180 down. Guess where their mortgage payment is on a traditional 30-year? Do you remember from Wednesday or from Friday, what they said?
For the 30-year?
For the 30-year, do you remember ballpark what the mortgage payment was?
5,500.
$5,500 a month. So 20% down, $850 purchase price.
That's 7%.
Yeah, or it was based on whatever, you know, your average rates are. So I use these numbers without showing him anything off the top of my head, and it was huge for him to realize. I said, so where's your mortgage at? He's like $2,200 a month. I said, exactly. I said, so your new buyer with almost $200,000 down. I said, that's the challenge. So then this is the next picture I painted for him. Then we get into the flex market summary report. And again, I knew these numbers without looking at it, but what I'm going to highlight on here is for every, so you pull up the zip code. As you type in the zip code, it's for last month. The number I knew that I wanted him to focus on is there were 15 active properties between 8 and 900,000, 15 in this zip code active. Guess how many sold? He's like, I don't know. I said 3 sold out of 15, right? I said, so you got to be top 3 out of 15. And he's getting the visualization. I said, so it's not every home. I said, your average days on market, 58 days. Average days on market for last month, 2 months. That's your average. So the absorption rate's at 1.52. I didn't even get into that with him. But what I wanted to tell him is you still have no competition. Less than 2 months inventory is still extremely low. But what's going to happen is we got to price it right before your neighbor puts the house on the market. And you have to do more things to sell your home because you got a great home. And you're at the perfect time. I said, the problem is you have a negative stigma attached to your house now because it's been on the market for 6 months, hasn't sold, even though people don't realize you started at 960 and eventually got down to 858. I said, so we got to hit them hard with the price, and we got to hit them hard with the commission that you're offering to make sure that we drive as much demand as we can to this particular home, right? And again, the whole time I'm advising, I'm willing to flex with them. It's not that I'm not, but he was like, well, you don't think we can do like 805 or 810? I said, you can. I said, but can I share with you what I would do if it were me? He said, 100%. I said, if it's me, it's 800,000. Because I know, and I've seen it go, that if you have it priced at the right price point, you're going to get the action that you want, create a multiple offer situation, and you can go 30 plus over. We can see what your highest number is if we get low enough to the right number. Right now, I said in December, you couldn't do that. January, February, you can do that now. I said the market is changing by month right now. So that's what you need, is somebody who's in this 24/7 and doing exactly what we're doing between trainings, staying up to date in terms of what's happening on the marketplace, knowing what situations are going multiple offer, because some still are. It's not all doom and gloom, and it's not all chasing a crashing market. And then I drew that picture that I've done before. I said, this is the market, this is the direction. You keep pricing here and trying to chase it here. Well, by the time you change it to here, this rock is now down here. I said, you got to get out in front of it and start pushing it up. That's the key. And I literally drew that image to him, and he knew exactly what we're talking about. So, at the end of it, I said, when we're filling out the listing agreement, I'm getting over to that. But I asked him before that, I said, so how do you feel with what I'm sharing with you right now? He's like, oh, it's good. I said, no, well, how do you feel about me representing you and selling your home? He's like, I can tell you know your stuff. I can tell you're going to represent me well. I said, okay, well, how do you want to approach this? And so this is where we went back on the 3 to 2.5%. As we're looking through, I said, we got to clean the house. I said, if my cleaning crew comes in here, she's going to charge me $1,000 to clean this place, to get it ready for what it needs to be for us to do the photos right? I said, so your pool needs to be cleaned. We need to get the landscaping done, right? And do this. He's like, well, I have Wednesday and Thursday off. We can have it done by that point in time. I said, that's great. And he was willing to do it himself. I said, you can. He said, well, if you charge me 6%, will you do those things? So 100%. So now for that 0.5% difference, roughly $4,000, I'm going to come out of pocket. And I shared with them. I said, look, I have no problem putting some skin in the game. I want you to know, I know I'm going to sell your house. I know it, as long as you follow my guidance, right? But if you don't follow my guidance, then we got to challenge you. That's why I'm interviewing you, just like you're interviewing me. I need to make sure that before I stick my name on this or start spending money out of my pocket to try to promote and sell your home, that we're actually going to be able to get it sold. So he knew I was serious. He knew I was willing to gamble. He knew I was willing to put my skin in the game because of my confidence there. He loved it. He was all right, let's do the 6%. In my head, like, oh my gosh, okay, let's go. And we start filling it out, and we went forward with it. We start filling it out. Then on the pricing, he agrees to 800,000, and that's going to be our approach. But that's what they're looking for, is in terms of that confidence, knowing that we have to get to it. And the other closing question I start on is photos. Okay. So I start looking at the schedule and try to figure out timing. And I say, okay, so when do you think we'll have this place ready? That's where the conversation was going back and forth, where he agreed, because he knows the only way I get paid is if we get him the results. So you have to figure out how to do that, because people get focused on the listing agreement of thinking, well, whatever price I put on here, whatever commission I put on here, they're negotiating the listing agreement. They feel like that's their job of what they're supposed to do. And what we have to be able to separate, to take the pressure off on them signing it, is that it does matter what's on here. But what's most important are the offers that they get on what they sign off on, so that it's not over yet. And unless you're truly happy with that second part, then none of this even matters, because the gal who had the agreement before got 0, right? When it was all said and done. And I'm empathetic for it. It's not that I'm not. Been on that side of it before. It stinks. That's the reality of what it is. But at 6 months, to figure it out, you have to figure it out, and you got to be able to guide them during that. Any questions on this or the numbers? Because this always paints the picture and helps them understand in terms of the pricing.
Brandon, you just went 1 month back on that?
Yeah. So you can only go the month before. when you pull the flex market summary report.
Then further, I had multiple months.
Oh, yeah, no, you can go further before, but what I'm saying is in terms of when I bring this up, right?
That's what I was asking, you just use.
Yeah, just the 1 month. So it's, and we'll go into that in terms of, I know what works for me with what I use. And when I refer to what's happened the previous month. Now, with that being said, again, a lot changes in 30 days, right? So you have to figure out what are you trying to accomplish, and you got to discover for them for what's important. Because a majority are going to follow my lead, a majority, if I've done the right things through the conversation. But in some situations, they still feel they're right. And it actually happened ironically from the person who referred me this client. And he still priced it about 30,000 as a condo, priced about 30,000 higher than what I told him was even possible. So we started at 450 and the comps were at like 405, 410. And he was, and so anyways, after about 2 weeks, we got it down to 430 and I ended up doubling in that one at 430, but we got the action once the price came down to that, to the 430,000. So I still took the listing, still took it higher and in that particular market. He did listen to me and that was the condition I made. I said, look, we'll start at your number. I know the market. I know nobody's going to write at 450,000. I said, but I'm going to try. I'm going to do everything I can to sell it. As you know, I get paid more if I sell it for a higher price. I just don't want you taking it thinking, you know, that it's going to happen, but let's try. Again, this is car sales are different than home sales, right? So we did it. But the condition was 2 weeks, we got to drop the price if it didn't. And 2 weeks later, he dropped the price. Once we did, we created the multiple offer situation. I think we got at least 2 offers on that one. But I ended up meeting the guy at an open house who ended up writing on that particular property. So it worked out. So, but yeah, the numbers are big with that. And then there were 6 pending. So 15 active. So these are the 4 that are right. Active, or start with the active 15. Sold was 3. Pending was 6 and new was 2. So you want to share that with them so they understand that. I want to get into these graphs because this was another big important point. This one here. Be the one with, okay, typical reduction stabilizing in the 5 to 6% range. So this was a graph they showed for last year that the average price reduction was about 5 to 6%. Why is that important?
But can you repeat that?
So the average price reduction last year was between 5 to 6% for the homes that had to reduce their price. Why is that important? How can you use that to help paint a story, to paint a picture? How are we doing on time? I want to make sure we're respecting this time.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, it just kind of shows that visual graph that, okay, where the market is going,
Good, yeah, that's a
You know,
good point with it.
past and future. So you kind of have to, you know, you can see how
The
things
trend.
will progress.
Yeah, that's good for that. What were you gonna say, Veronica?
No, I mean, it just sort of also lets them know, like, the price side of it, you're going to reduce it.
Exactly.
And where the market's at, I think it's important for us to educate them. You know, the market backs up in the summer, it's not the market now.
Right.
And whenever I do get listing that, the client's just like, no, I want to list at this price.
Right.
And you know that if you find gonna sell.
Right.
I said, you know what, it's the market.
Yeah.
Especially last summer, I remember thinking like 2 listings and they wanted this high.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what, I don't know what the market's
Right.
doing right now.
We don't know.
Everything was overbid.
Right.
Do
And
it,
then you got it.
but I can tell you, in 10 states, we have no showings. And I actually show them the chart on our script.
Right.
book, Where it says like no showings, what is it, like no showings and no offers means you're overpriced 10%. So I tell it like, you know, I give them that the stats. But that works. I think if you're upfront and say, you know what, I can respect that, let's list at that. I already showed you, you know, the comps and what I think you should list at, but if it doesn't sell, if we have no offers, if the market the way it is, right now, then, you know, we're gonna reduce it. And pretty much, when you do go ask for that reduction, they're open. Like, they're like, okay, we're right.
Set it up for them
Yeah.
to expect.
That's the future facing. That's what has to happen in the listing presentation is the future facing. So what she described is called the pricing strategy. Okay, so there's intelligent pricing is one piece. Then there's pricing strategy. Pricing strategy is exactly what she explained. That's how we test the market. Nobody knows what a home's gonna sell. Nobody knows. But what we do know is every home will sell if it's at the right price. That's a truth. That's a guarantee. You get the home to the right price, it'll sell. The key is how do we find the right price based on the formula that she just shared right there, right? So the key number is the reason why 5 to 6% is so important. This is what I was able to paint the picture. I said, let's do the math on 5 to 6%. Ironically, the same thing as a commission, 5 to 6%, right? So let's do the math. So if we misprice this, and it's a 6% mistake, that's how I presented it, what does that come out to? $45,000 roughly. So is it worth it to take a chance and misprice it and have to chase it 5 to 6% down on that whole drawing that we had here while we're trying to chase the market down? Or is it probably a better strategy to just place it not 5 to 6% below, which is ultimately what I ended up doing, and seeing if we can drive it up? What makes more sense? Would you rather chase it down and have one offer coming in and knowing they have all the leverage? Or would you rather flip the leverage and have people bid against each other and at least 2 offers where we get the terms that you know best fit? What are you looking for? That's the key, is being able to differentiate. You have to show 2 different scenarios and get them to understand we're coaching them through that process. We're future pacing them so that if we take the listing at 840, which I could have done, I could have took it at 840. Now the challenge in this market, when the average days of market is 60 days, how long do you wait before you do the price reduction? Right? But one key stat that came up that I've shared already is 75% of the homes that sold towards the end of last year sold in the first 30 days, even though the average days on market was higher. So what you want to differentiate to them is that if you're going to sell your home, you want to do it in the first 30 days, because if you've already gone past that, now you're going to fit the average, which right now is almost 60 days on the market. So you wait 60 days before you do a price drop. So typically that's when you know when to do the price drop, is based on the average days on market. So after you paint the picture with the market, then you show them your stats. And you show them, after you talk about the interview, I'm interviewing you just like you're interviewing me. And I showed them my list price to sale price is like 1.02. Which means basically what we list at is what we sell it at, actually a little bit higher, right? It also shows that I work with clients who follow my advice, okay? The other key number is your average days on market. Mine show 12.2. And it just blows them away when they just went through 6 months of sitting on the market. But you're showing your average of every home that you sold is 12.2. That's the power in those numbers. That's what does the talking for you. You don't have to talk about how great you are. You just have to have a game plan. You got to have a vision, and you have to ask questions and then know when to give them that vision. Any questions with that? Any ideas or feedback that you want to throw out there that it triggered something for you? These are a couple other, I'll just show you the charts so you can see them. So we talked about the 5 to 6. This one says coming off 2 years of very strong price growth. It shows what the appreciation is each month. And in 2020, it was 11%. This is through California. 2021, 19%. So 2 years combined, that's roughly what? 30% appreciation. This is throughout California. Then in 2022, still showing 6% appreciation. So coming off 2 years of very strong price growth, California existing single family annual median price growth. So what the median price growth still went up almost 30% over 2 years, and then 36%. Okay. And that's important for them to understand, as they think, well, I just missed the best time to sell the home. No, you're still there. You're still up, you're still benefiting from all that increased appreciation. Now, if you continue to wait, the one thing we do know, especially with the trends of the 5 to 6%, there's a good chance that you are going to be losing the opportunity to compete right now where you have very little competition, because we know people are waiting, and they are, and the calls are coming in. They're starting to. People are getting ready to put their houses on the market. You're going to see a bump, and it's happening already. It's taking a little bit longer. This first quarter's been dry for a lot of people across the board. So that was the thing, and I said it probably at the last one that Mike Ferry talked about, said be patient. Said everybody has their goals right out the gate. And they're gonna be freaking out because they're not hitting their goals right now for that first quarter. Be patient, by the end of the quarter, you're gonna start hitting those numbers. They will start coming in, then you're gonna have a big quarter as long as you're putting in the work right now. You know, in terms of what you're practicing, what you're doing, so. Any other questions, just kind of on that? I tried to share as much as I can with that experience, just so that we can work off of that. Are there?
Great.
Thank you. Is there, you know, one of the things I wanted to practice and encourage everybody, did anybody do the negotiation class or listen to that yesterday? Any feedback? You like it?
Negotiation class?
The negotiation?
Oh, that one.
Negotiation.
Yeah, so it's on Mondays from 10 to 10:30.
Yeah, that's.
And it's, you have to register before you can get access to it. So I've sent some emails out on it, but make sure that you do. So it's a 6-part series.
They just used it on drugs there.
Oh, good job, man. Good job. So what are you doing? So share what you're doing. That was perfect though. But share with everybody what you're doing. Yeah,
Well, what was I doing?
yeah. So what's it called? What's the technique?
Well, it's negotiations. It's kind of like, when you get up in the morning and you notice how good looking you really are. You're mirroring.
Okay, that part wasn't. No.
He's got to give it. He's got to give it. Right.
Well, and it's not necessarily what may have been taught to you if you had classes in the past with body language and things. It was, at least for this one, this was an introductory. And it's all about getting information. And what I'm taking from today is Brandon is basically touching on the same thing with how it went about with the appointment, gathering information, and it's how you do it, and you do it by mirroring.
Yeah, mirroring is what it's called.
And
You think you're good looking when you wake up in the morning.
no, I said.
Let's get to stuck.
That was the.
You remember that Calvin and Hobbes?
Yeah. I love Calvin.
Or was it Calvin and Hobbes build a gap?
I don't know.
Um,
Yeah, you just sidetracked everybody who was visualizing you in front of the mirror. First thing in the morning.
it is not great.
So no, that was great. So, and great example of it, because I'm like, huh, like what? You know, and I was like, I sent an email 3 times, you know, and I'm still giving you more info.
Right,
But-
and what he said is, which was beautiful, unlike me in the mirror, was, you, like, when he's done teaching the class, people can use it on him, and he won't even know. Because you don't. And it is uncomfortable trying to do that. I worked on that yesterday, just out and about.
Good. And it worked pretty good.
How does
Who's doing it?
It actually, different people, some people are guarded and they don't say very much. And others would just, you know, it's like spill the beans on whatever it is they're just going through.
Some people just want to be given that opportunity. to
Yeah,
tell
and
you.
it was interesting, and even though we weren't really supposed to take notes, I did, and I don't know if they were good, but any good in the sense that you really only needed to focus on one thing, and that was repeat what they said. And how you repeat it.
It
You
is.
weren't supposed to take notes.
So it's.
No, he said,
There's
there's like yeah, you did that. There is here's like one, next week is what I'm looking forward to, where he's getting into,
Objections, good. Yeah, and it's, yeah, so it's through the, the Microsoft Teams is what they use.
Yeah.
And you can watch the recording one. I watched it this morning, so it is good.
It was
His focus is on, it's called mirroring, which you hear mirror and match, but he was differentiating between just like trying to match the rate of speed and doing those things. His focus more is on your listening part, making sure that once they share whatever they share, you ask a question first, they share. whatever they share, whatever their last main point was, you just ask a question off of that last point to show you're listening, but you say it with an upswing so that you say it in, you know, in a tone and in a way that gets them to elaborate more. So you
So
show
that's
you're
what I
listening and
found
do that. Go ahead.
the most uncomfortable, the upswing,
Well-
because it almost was like a little bit, like when he would say it, it would come across to me as confrontational.
Right. It
So
can.
that's,
It
yeah, so
can.
that's why I
That's-
was like,
Well, how,
That's the art of it.
so,
Go ahead.
so ask me a question and then mirror me. Go ahead. Just ask me.
how was your day today?
Starting off great.
Starting off great.
You just did it. What's the problem?
Yeah, but I feel like
No?
I wasn't really doing it. What's that?
You did.
No, you're good. You did it. So it's, an upswing is doing it in a question, not as a, it's more out of curiosity. So it's just kind of like, you know, so it was great. You know, I would say it was great. That's awesome, right? But he just says to say it was great, like, you know, to try to get them to dig more. What I've learned, at least in terms of technique, and this is what I do, it's through mediation. It's called reframing. Reframing is very similar to the mirror advice. You want to show that the better you are as a listener, the better you're going to be in terms of every relationships getting deeper, things getting better, putting more deals together. It's all based on your listening ability and how you make somebody feel when they're speaking. You're all making me feel really good right now, right? So you're all acing this test, but it's key. It's the eye contact, it's the confidence, it's how you look at somebody, it's your tone of voice, it's how you respond to it. Think of it, do I come across as an interrogator, right? Where their guard's gonna be a little close, or that was kind of an awkward question, or why do they want to know that? Or is it something that comes off as they're sincerely interested and curious about what you have to share with them? So what reframing is if they give you 3 points, 3 things that are important to them, you know how to sum up all 3 of them pretty quickly. And focus on what's important, and then I'll hit them with the first point, whatever the first thing they said that was important to them. Like, so with the example I said earlier with the 2 objections, there's 2 objections: price, overpricing it, and the commission being too low. Those are 2 major objections to overcome. And what I would share in that situation, may I share with you what my concern is? If that is your ultimate goal and you're sharing that with every agent that you speak with, yeah, what's your concern? Well, my concern is that's what you're going to attract. Somebody who's going to tell you that you can get a higher price than you truly can get, or that, and for the very reason I talked about that business model. I don't believe that's, you know, they're following the shiny object. They're following the wrong things. You as a leader help them focus on the right things. And you can only confront them with a question when you've established that relationship that everybody knows you truly care for them, you care about what their goal is. So it can come off as a confrontation, like a negative confrontation, too early if you haven't established that trust yet. So it's the timing of when you ask these questions and when you start painting these pictures by what you're doing is critical as well. You have to know that the relationship's at a good spot before you start going into commission, before you go into price, before you go to the deep. Uncover it, find the answers for it, listen to it, assure them, oh, I'm going to show you how you're going to, what I hear you saying, and that's a shift, right? Now it's a focus. They're talking about, I want as much money as possible, pay the least amount of commission. They're thinking of expense, of what the cost is to hire you as an agent. You want to shift them from cost to benefit, not pain, but what's the benefit? What's the good? The good is, I'm not going to jerk you around, right? The good is, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, and I'm going to have you hear, and you're going to walk away with as much money as you possibly can, because I know what we do is proven. And what I know I offer is truth and understanding of this market and the ability to communicate that to you and to the other person on the other side. Is that what you're looking for? 100% they're looking for that. So know what they want. Discover what they want. It's very similar with a majority of people, but everything's specific and you can't assume. You got to discover. You got to develop that relationship, that dance, until it gets to a point where it feels real good. And then you have to be willing to close without saying, are you ready to sign the contract? Right? I don't think I ever have to say that, but we get to it and I have the paper, the listing agreement's there. It's ready to go. We'll start filling it out. You know, and if they start telling me, hey, wait, what are you doing here? then we're gonna talk, okay, well, obviously I haven't answered something. You know, is there hesitation in getting started? I thought we were here because you wanted to list your home. Sell your property, so let's take some steps back. Share with me what your concern is. Well, my concern is 6% commission. Okay, let's talk more about that. And then we're gonna dive deep into it, overcome it. If I need to flex, I'll flex, right? But it's starting from a strong place that they want to follow that lead. Yes, sir.
So this is on the buyer end. And just had a meeting. And the objection was qualified here
Mhm.
with this amount of HOA,
Right,
but I only want to look at things here, don't send me any properties here.
right,
And so my conversation with that, due to low inventory and where the market's going, depending on what is for like townhomes. So depending on where it's at and what the sales trends are.
Uh-huh.
Well, wouldn't it make more sense to keep this search here?
right,
Because it may have a lower HOA that will offset, but on top of that, if we look at it and say, hey, I like these, but I'm concerned that that might be beyond my payment comfort level.
right,
And I said, well, right now, I see a lot of price reductions.
Yep.
Wouldn't it make sense to, if you identify one, have me do my thing and see what the sales trends are in there, and if they are trending down, that means we could probably come in lower, have a successful deal,
right,
and then you get the property one for the same price that you might have got if you went to look under and you've never seen this property.
Yeah.
And the answer was, okay, let's leave it in.
Good.
And that was all it was, but it was very interesting because it was an adamant objection.
Yeah.
He was actually very like,
irritated.
I don't, yeah,
No, it is, and it's a way I know when I was brought into the business of always make sure you don't show them too high, it'll get their hopes up, it'll throw off their expectations. More of it is you change their perspective. That's what we're doing. That's what our art is to change people's perspectives. And they have a belief, and there's a reason why, for whatever reason she was feeling that. We have to discover what it is and then help them do exactly what you did of understanding the benefits of leaving it open. And that's typically how I explain it. I say, look, not a whole lot out there. I want you to see everything. Yeah, you're going to weed through some things, but I don't want you to miss anything. So the more restrictions we put on it, you may miss something that you didn't realize you were open to, as well as I need you to also learn and understand the market. So you see where things are trending, and something that's starting up here with 60 days average days on market, 70% of the homes that aren't selling, right? Only 30% that are actually closing. Then what that tells me is you want to see everything in case you can get a 5 to 6% discount on a property that's overpriced before they drop the price.
It
Right?
also depends on the market.
It is.
If this were when we were getting multiple offers and things like that.
Yeah.
well,
That's a different story.
Yeah,
Right.
now you're
You can do that.
and you were setting the expectation back then. Well, you need to look 100,000 under what you think you can afford because it's going to go up that much, right?
Exactly.
So it's future facing, setting expectations. A great point.
Interesting because the search areas and specific area. And I basically said, well, why not consider this area